Arsenal and Arteta have a chance to do something special. I know me and so many of you guys would make this decision, but it's just whether Mikel Arteta decides to do it. I also want to be speaking about Emile Smith Rowe because it seems like the Smith Rowe story has taken a bit of a twist that I wasn't really expecting. So I want to hear your guys' opinions on it. And also Eddie Nketiah, because we're seeing the links with Eddie Nketiah and Marseille. But there's kind of some discussion that I'm not seeing a lot of people have that I think we need to talk about. Before we get into it though, just very quickly, do me a favour, hit like on this video. So the first place I want to start is Ethan Nwaneri. So many people these past few weeks have kind of been chipping in and saying Mikel Arteta never plays the youth. Mikel Arteta doesn't have a pathway for these young players to succeed at Arsenal. And I just think this is the perfect opportunity for Mikel Arteta to shut them people up, to quiet the noise. Because I guess it is a bit of a valid argument because we've seen players leave. And look, it frustrates me, it frustrates you. But I seriously think this Ethan Nwaneri story or this Ethan Nwaneri opportunity is something that Mikel Arteta can really use. We've seen all last season, probably since 2 seasons ago, that we need a left-footed number 8 to fill in that number 8 position, to be able to bring their left wing into play, just to be able to occupy that central midfield. And Ethan Nwaneri, I think, is the perfect candidate. A very good attacking player. So I just wanted to start this off by getting your guys' opinions. What's your thoughts on Ethan Nwaneri? Do you think this guy is now finally ready? Do you think this is the season that Mikel Arteta has to integrate this player into the squad? We've seen the pre-season squad be released and we've seen some good young players in there. I'm looking at Ethan Nwaneri and I'm saying if this guy has a good pre-season, I don't see why he couldn't fill in for that number 8 position for Arsenal next season and actually get quite a few games. I like the build of the player. I like the ability of the player. I really do think he can offer us something in that central midfield, going on to attacking midfield position in our first team next season. Let me know your thoughts on that. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is a bit of a curveball. You know, it's Emile Smith Rowe. We've heard, I don't know, for however long that Arsenal are going to sell Emile Smith Rowe in this transfer window. But, you know, aftv, they usually get some good scoops and they're coming out and saying Arsenal are not looking to sell Emile Smith Rowe. I'm sure some of you guys have seen this already. If you haven't, what's your thoughts on that? Do you think this story's true? You know, like I said, it's coming from a good source. aftv, are they putting this out there with some good information? I'm supposing they probably are, because the story we've been led to believe for the past few weeks is, no, Emile Smith Rowe's for sale in the summer. When the summer comes, Arsenal are going to look to get between 30 and 50 million for this player. But like I said, aftv coming out and saying Smith Rowe is not for sale. Arsenal want to keep him. What's your thoughts on that? Do you think this is true? Do you think Arsenal need to sell Emile Smith Rowe? I think Arsenal probably do, because we've seen Mikel Arteta towards the end of the last season didn't fancy Emile Smith Rowe in quite a few games where he probably had the opportunity to play him. So what does that tell you? If he's not willing to play him in some of the games, why would you keep a player that the manager doesn't feel comfortable in using? That's the way that I would look at this situation. If Mikel Arteta picked him in a few more games towards the end of last season, I'd look at it and say, well, he obviously trusts this player. He obviously sees something in him that he can offer the team. But we didn't see that. We saw him in, what was the game? Against Luton. He played well. But then after that, I don't think we really saw him after that. So when I read that, I was shocked, because the news I've been hearing is Arsenal will be looking to offload Smith Rowe in the summer between 30 and 50 million. Like I said, there's many clubs interested. Crystal Palace, Wolves, even Fulham as well. I don't know. Let me know your thoughts on that. What's your thoughts on them putting that story out? Do you think Smith Rowe will be for sale? And now Eddie Nketiah. Look, I think this is an important topic, because Eddie Nketiah probably will be sold in this transfer window. We've seen the links to Marseille. Arsenal apparently holding out for 50 million. And this is where I think we might have a bit of a problem, because, look, let's be honest, Premier League clubs, we always overpay for players. That's just the way it is. If Arsenal or Chelsea or Man United, Man City want to buy a player, there's always an extra bit of money added on top of what the player is probably worth. English clubs overspend on players. That's nothing new. But Marseille are a massive team, a massive footballing institution. But can you see them paying £50 million for Eddie Nketiah? I don't know if they have the facilities to pay that kind of transfer fee. I'm sure they have the money. I'm sure the owners have more than enough money. But, you know, for a player who's kind of on the fringes at Arsenal, do you see a team like Marseille coming in and paying the 50 million? Is that 50 million fee even correct? Did Arsenal just put it out in hopes that someone would get fairly close to that number. Would they accept 35 to 40 million? Maybe. And will Marseille pay that? I don't know, maybe. The talks are progressing well, and from everything we're hearing, this looks like this is a deal that could happen. Marseille are having a kind of transformative summer. We've seen De Zerbi coming, we've seen Greenwood coming, and it seems like he's very interested in Eddie Nketiah leading the line. In terms of an opportunity for Eddie Nketiah, I would be looking at this and saying this club is perfect. They play in the French league, which, let's be honest, it's a weaker league, a slower league. Eddie Nketiah, I think, would thrive there. So I think in terms of development, this is probably the perfect opportunity for Eddie Nketiah to put himself out there, because I'm sure he's a player that looks at the current situation and say, well, I could be a striker for England in a few years' time. And if he goes away to France and has a really impactful first few years or 2-3 years, then I really think he could start to look at that England squad and try and break into that. So I think it's the perfect deal, but I'm not seeing Arsenal being linked with too many strikers. Now, maybe it will change when we sell Eddie Nketiah. The kind of memo going into this market is Arsenal will look to buy a striker. Now, I haven't heard anything in terms of a striker coming to Arsenal in about 4 weeks. Ever since, the summer transfer window started, the links to a striker have been basically non-existent. I would worry at that, because I'd be saying, right, Eddie Nketiah, is he a first-team player for Arsenal? No. Does he sit on the bench? Yes. So this is a player in the squad that you need to replace. And people will say, well, we're looking at wingers to bring in. But let's not forget, we already need a winger. So whether we lose Eddie Nketiah or keep Eddie Nketiah, we still need the winger anyway. So that was kind of something that was needed. So if we bring in the winger, that's not to replace Eddie Nketiah, and we still need to replace Eddie Nketiah in the squad. So if we do bring in a winger, we still need to bring in another striker or another man to fill the place of Eddie Nketiah on the bench. Eddie Nketiah did play some minutes last season. He played, a few games, probably not as much as some people would have liked, and maybe too much for some people. But what I'm saying is, if we sell Eddie Nketiah, we definitely need to replace him. And then that leaves you asking, who out there on the market could replace Eddie Nketiah? Because it isn't just about, filling the spot on the bench. You do need a player that you can turn to. Mikel Arteta, quite a few times last season, didn't mind turning to Eddie Nketiah. He certainly seemed more willing to trust a player like Eddie Nketiah as opposed to Emile Smith Rowe, for example. So you do need to bring in a player who's good enough to actually play some minutes, that Mikel Arteta can actually turn to the bench when we're maybe in need of a goal. It's 1-1 against the team that we should probably be beating, and he's looking at the bench thinking, who can I bring on to score? You do need your second or third choice striker to be, willing to be picked by Mikel Arteta. He needs to have a vision in his head that this player can impact the game. So, some people might say, well, you can look to maybe the youth academy and promote someone, but are those players going to be ready? Is that something you would do? Would you just bring up a young guy, or do you think we need to sign a winger and a striker? Let me know your thoughts on that. Thanks so much to everyone for watching and listening. Before you go, just very quickly, do me a favor, hit like on this video. Just like it and subscribe, and I'll speak to you all in tomorrow's video. Gooners, have a good day.